You get home from work and someone tells you your presentation was solid. Good structure, clear points, nice job done. You nod, say thanks, and forget it by dinner. But 3 weeks ago, a coworker said your voice sounded a little much in that same meeting. And you still hear it, in the shower, at 2 a.m. on a random Tuesday for no reason at all. You've had that presentation praised by 4 different people since then. None of it stuck the way those 5 words did. You can't even remember who gave you the nice compliment this afternoon, or what exact phrase they used, or the expression on their face while they said it. You remember exactly who said the other thing, exactly where they were standing, exactly what they were wearing, and exactly how the room felt for the 10 seconds afterward. One sentence, said in passing, outlived 100 sentences of actual praise, and it wasn't even meant as an insult. This is about why insults stick and compliments slide off, and it's not because you're insecure, or bad at taking a compliment, or too sensitive for your own good. It's because your brain was built to work exactly this way, on purpose, and has been for a very long time. By the end of this, you'll understand why one bad review can outweigh 50 good ones, why the sting never really fades on schedule no matter how much time passes, why it can resurface at random on an ordinary Tuesday with no obvious trigger at all, and why that's not a personality flaw at all. It's a filing system your brain inherited from a much more dangerous world than the one you're currently standing in. Psychologist Roy Baumeister spent years studying this exact pattern, and in a landmark 2001 paper, he and his colleagues reviewed hundreds of studies spanning relationships, money, health, learning, and everyday feedback. The conclusion had a name: bad is stronger than good. Across nearly every domain they tested, negative experiences carried more psychological weight than positive experiences of the exact same size. One bad event needs roughly 5 good ones just to balance it back out again, which means the math was never fair to begin with, and it was never supposed to be. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't unique to insults, or even to humans reacting emotionally to something personal. It shows up at the level of raw brain activity before any conscious judgment even has time to happen. Neuroscientist John Cacioppo found this asymmetry using EEG recordings on ordinary volunteers. Participants viewing negative images showed a stronger spike in something called the late positive potential, a measurable brain response tied to attention and memory encoding, compared to positive or neutral images, matched for the same emotional intensity. Your brain quite literally turns up the volume on bad news milliseconds before you're even aware you've seen it. The insult gets encoded harder than the compliment does, automatically, every single time, whether you want it to or not. But here's where it gets interesting. This reaction isn't a bug in the system. It's inherited and it's old, and it used to keep your ancestors alive. Evolutionary psychologists point to a simple survival logic. Missing a threat could kill you. Missing a compliment never could. An ancestor who shrugged off a rustling bush lost nothing most of the time, until the one time it mattered, and that one time was the only one that ever counted. So the brain evolved to weight danger signals, and by extension, criticism, rejection, and insults, far more heavily than anything pleasant, because the cost of ignoring a threat was extinction, and the cost of ignoring a compliment was nothing whatsoever. Social rejection carried its own version of that same math. In small tribal groups, being disliked wasn't just an uncomfortable feeling. It could mean losing access to food, protection, or a mate, which made a sharp word from another person genuinely dangerous information, not just an unpleasant one. Your brain doesn't know the tribe is gone. It still files an insult under the same folder it always did. Compliments were never a survival issue. Threats always were every single time for every single generation before you, stretching back further than language, further than fire, further than anything you'd recognize as human. But here's where it gets interesting. This same wiring shows up in something as mundane as an annual performance review, or a first date that mostly went well. Researchers studying workplace feedback have repeatedly found what's sometimes called the negativity ratio, the idea that people need several positive comments just to offset the emotional impact of a single negative one. Psychologist John Gottman's decades of research on couples found something almost identical. Relationships tend to thrive around a ratio of roughly 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction, and they start to break down once that ratio slips even slightly. Negativity isn't just remembered more vividly than everything else. It's priced higher by every part of the system that decides what actually matters. But here's where it gets interesting. The story doesn't stop at memory. It quietly changes how you predict the future, too. Psychologists who study negativity bias in decision-making have found that people weigh potential losses roughly twice as heavily as equivalent potential gains, a pattern first formalized by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in their work on prospect theory, which eventually won a Nobel Prize. A single critical comment doesn't just get remembered once and filed away. It gets used as a forecast, a preview of how people might see you the next time you speak up, which is exactly why it keeps resurfacing uninvited, at the worst possible moments. But here's where it gets interesting. Even the speed of forgetting isn't equal. Between the two, memory researchers have found that positive memories tend to fade faster and lose details sooner than negative ones of comparable significance, a pattern sometimes called the fading affect bias. Pleasant memories soften at the edges within weeks. Painful ones keep their sharp corners for years, sometimes decades, replaying with the same clarity as the day they happened. Ask someone to describe a compliment from a year ago, and most people struggle to recover the exact wording. Ask them about an insult from the same stretch of time, and the sentence often comes back whole, word for word, tone included, like it was recorded rather than heard. But here's where it gets interesting. Modern life didn't invent this bias, but it did find a way to weaponize it. Researchers studying online comment sections and social media feedback have found that a single negative comment can dominate a person's emotional reaction to an entire post, even when it's buried under dozens of positive ones sitting right above it. Psychologists sometimes call this the one bad apple effect in digital feedback. The negative comment gets read more slowly, quoted mentally more often, and remembered days later, while the pile of positive comments blurs into a single vague impression of people liked it. Platforms didn't design this on purpose. They just built systems that hand your 5-million-year-old threat detector an infinite supply of new things to detect, at a scale no tribe could ever have produced. Here's the wrinkle. This bias doesn't just shape what you remember. It can quietly shape who you become over time. People who receive consistent criticism early in life, especially from parents, teachers, or peers, often carry measurably higher rates of self-doubt into adulthood, because the brain doesn't just recall the insult once and move on. It uses it as a rule, a piece of evidence about who you supposedly are, extracted from a sample size of one throwaway comment made on an ordinary afternoon. And there's something almost unfair about the whole arrangement. The compliments were probably the more accurate signal all along. Most praise is specific, considered, and earned through actual effort. Most casual insults are half-formed, said by someone tired or distracted or having a bad day of their own that has nothing to do with you. But your brain doesn't grade insults on accuracy. It grades them on threat level, and threat always wins the vote. Even stranger, the sting doesn't stay constant once it's stored. Recalling a painful comment can actually re-trigger a version of the same stress response each time you replay it in your head, which is part of why a 3-week-old insult can still make your chest tighten at 2 a.m. for no visible reason. You're not really remembering the sentence anymore at that point. You're reliving the alarm it set off the very first time you heard it. So, you're back in that kitchen, dinner going cold, still hearing 4 words from 3 weeks ago instead of the 50 kind ones from this afternoon. That's not a character flaw, and it's not proof of anything true about who you are. That's a 5-million-year-old alarm system doing exactly what it was built to do. protecting you from a world that mostly doesn't exist anymore, a world with no locked doors, no police, no way back if the tribe turned on you. The insult isn't louder because it's truer. It's just older than you are.